So we'd like to talk to you today and just kind of get a bit of feedback really from you about the rise of domestic AC in the UK. Obviously last year was interesting for so many different reasons, but particularly interesting for our industry. So not only from the educational side in terms of the difficulties you had with online learning, but also sort of out in the field and not being able to get to jobs, etc. And we'd be interested to talk around, has there been a rise in domestic AC installations and kind of what impact that could have on the industry with best practice? Are there going to perhaps be people from other industries coming in and trying to do domestic air conditioning with a lack of qualifications? So just sort of an informal chat. So so don't worry too much. This really is just a chat. So do feel free to, you know, say whatever it is that you want to say. We're all friends here. So first of all, I think we just need to start with the main question of, have you both, or has anybody seen a rise in domestic AC over the last year?
I'll start if you like.
Yeah.
I think from our point of view, Faye, we have seen an increase in domestic in both the UK and Europe anyway. I think the question is, has the pandemic increased that? And if so, is it here to stay? I think Shaun and Daniel, maybe over to you guys.
Yeah, I've seen a steady rise over the last few years, to be honest. So it hasn't just been since the pandemic. I mean, when I first started, there was hardly anything in the way of domestic, and now I'm probably doing maybe 50-60% of my work as domestic installations. So I've just seen sort of like just a steady rise, and it's just continuing to grow. So I'm expecting sort of like more this year again.
That's really interesting, actually, that it's not just down to the pandemic, which is, I think, what, you know, perhaps we all assumed it would be, people working from home and, you know, wanting cool and comfort in their houses. But if it's been a rise over the last couple of years, then, you know, there's obviously other factors. I mean, you know, the UK has got progressively warmer. Could it be that we're moving away from AC being a luxury item to actually being more of a utility? Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, Shaun, from your point of view, do you sort of cover domestic installations in the work that you do, like with the apprentices, or is it very much commercial? Have you had more calls for sort of domestic training, that sort of thing?
No, well, we've got a lot of domestic AC stuff within the college that the students actually install themselves. It's one of their assessments that we carry out on them, where they install, decommission everything and service domestic AC as well as all the commercial stuff. I would say, because a lot of what I do at the college as well is go out on site and see the guys on site while they're doing their on-site assessment work. And I've increasingly gone out, as Daniel was saying, over the last few years, more and more am I going to domestic properties where they're having AC put in. But over probably the last year, or maybe a little bit before, we're getting more and more plumbers coming into us, because obviously the college has got a big plumbing department. A lot of the plumbers are coming into us. Oh, all these heat pumps and everything. How do we sort this out? How do we get onto these courses? And you're like explaining to them that it isn't that easy. It's not just a thing of, yeah, it's because they come out with, oh, well, you only pressure test. We pressure test. Yeah, but you're pressure testing at about 3 bar. We're pressure testing at 40 bar or whatever on an AC. It depends what system you're putting in. But more and more people are looking at, is there a quick way into it? Can I just come and do an F-gas course to be able to, once I've installed my side of it, and then I can sort out the other bit because it's got these F-gases in it. And you're trying to explain to them it isn't that easy. But I would say, yeah, over the last, especially over the last year with the heat pump bit, with all the new regulations that are coming in soon with reference to heat pumps and gas, natural gas being in houses and all that, it's going to make it even more prime, really, for our industry to really take off. We'll be putting loads of it in.
So do you think then, and this is a question to everybody, I suppose, do you think that we potentially might have a problem in terms of best practice in the future, and people perhaps coming into the industry or installing aircon in a domestic setting that perhaps aren't qualified or aren't trained? Is that a concern?
Oh yeah, I see it all the time.
Oh really?
yeah. I probably at least 10 installs that I do in a year will be taking out someone else's work, and it tends to be stuff that they bought off the internet, because obviously if you go to a supplier now, you have to have your F-gas qualifications to be able to buy things. You can't actually just go into a supplier and buy things, but you can go onto the internet and buy a unit, and they will just recommend it's installed by an F-gas qualified engineer. So you can still get this stuff online, and people are putting them in who shouldn't be. And then I tend to have to go back and take things out and put in new stuff. So I see it quite a lot, yeah.
It's interesting that it's not more regulated, actually, in terms of just being able to buy a unit online and give it a go.
No, it's strange, because you know, you go to a supplier, you have to provide a certificate to show that you're qualified to install, and I don't know how to get away with it, to be honest, because, you know, even places like Halfords, you can go and buy the refrigerant, or I don't know if you still can, but you used to be able to buy the refrigerant to top up a car. Now, why are you topping a car up? It's got a leak. It needs to be repaired. So
that's because it's a mobile unit and not a fixed unit. But you're right. You know, you can buy you can go and buy your split, for instance, but you'd have to be registered to buy a bottle. So I think you'll find that the people will be putting the units in and trying to keep within that holding charge if they know it's got a holding charge and what that meterage actually means. Just interesting, Daniel, when you're doing your domestic splits, are you going in and just doing one unit in a converted garage, for instance, being turned into an office or a bedroom, or are you doing multiple units in a house?
I do a mixture of everything. So I'd say more often than not it's a unit, but that tends to lead on to more. But then I also work for a company who do sort of high-end builds up in London, and that will be literally like a VRV system in a house. So that would be like everywhere. So it's kind of a bit of everything. I think realistically, people are more likely to get just a single split put in because of the cost implications. And then once they've got it and they like it, you know, then they're going to say, could you come and do another one? You know, we've got a bit of cash free, so can you come and do something else?
And splits are so much more accessible. They're so much more accessible and cheaper now, aren't they? They draw less current, so the costing for the sparks is easier because you don't have such big cables. Chances are you've got the room in the board to be able to pick up that additional power, so you can actually put in. You know, when I finished, we found that we were going from, instead of just the high-end London domestic stuff, like you say, it was starting to filter into people converting garages into offices, conservatories, all this sort of stuff. And then you were starting to do multis and mini VRVs and stuff like that. So, but you're seeing that still growing more. I'm definitely I mean, I know, because most of my work used to be in London, and I'm getting more and more local stuff now. So I mean, there are times when I don't go to London for months on end, and it's purely because everything I'm doing is within sort of half an hour, 45 minutes of me, sort of out in Sussex and Kent and Surrey. So there's definitely more domestic stuff happening.
And I suppose as well, domestic clients are a lot different from commercial clients, in terms of aesthetics and wanting things to look a certain way. And I suppose that kind of presents its own challenges as well. And it'd be interesting to hear from you, Shaun, on this as well. Because in a domestic setting, you're going to want to try and avoid a gravity drain wherever possible. It may well be that you can't use a gravity drain. So in terms of training and again, sort of best practice, I mean, Daniel, I'm sure you've seen some wonderful sites in domestic settings of what people have tried to do, and but Shaun, in terms of training, how do you train people to avoid using that gravity drain system, and to make the best of the aesthetics for people in a domestic setting?
Well, I would say, looking at the aesthetics of it, we probably don't train people for the aesthetics. We train people how to install it, how to put the pipework in. Yes, they put some trunking up within the units that they put up within the college, but I don't suppose we really look at it as if to say, right, this is how it's going to be a perfect thing in somebody's house. This is just, right, you need to put it in properly, be able to bend the pipework properly, braze it properly, pressure test, vac, charge, all that, so it works properly. I think the aesthetics comes through the knowledge of you actually being out on site and working and getting trained by engineers who you're on site with. So the apprentices who we get some apprentices who are dragged along, get given tools to carry here, there and everywhere. And we get apprentices who are, right, come here, sunshine, this is how you do it. I've been out onto a few sites and seen guys do different bits and pieces that I'm like, so, geez, I haven't seen that done for years. And it's because they're working with an older engineer who was used to the old apprenticeships, where when I was in it years ago, whoever was your mentor wanted you to be the best in the company because you were his apprentice, and he didn't want anyone else being as good as you were. So everyone was like taught like that. These days, it's not always like that. Quite a lot of them these days, it's just you're a second pair of hands. You're there to lift, carry, do bits. And like I say, I go out on some sites and the poor lads are like, oh, I don't really know. I don't really do that this often. And so like, yeah, but you've been in the industry for like 18 months minimum now. And why are you not doing this? Well, no, he won't let me. And you're like, Jesus, you're never going to get anywhere. So I would say aesthetics, how it looks, probably no, we don't. But we're there to show them how to do it, how to put the pipework in, how to do this, how to do that, really.
So do you think there is opportunity in the industry to actually teach the apprentices, the importance of, it's all down to reputation, isn't it? It's down to making it work, but making it look nice, making sure the customer's happy. And you obviously teach the very practical how to do it side. If they're not getting the support from their employers in terms of thinking about those things, which ultimately gives them a good reputation, is there opportunity to talk more about that in the industry and to provide support about the importance of, for example, using a condensate pump instead of using gravity drain, and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think we have the guys from Fujitsu come down. We use a lot of the Fujitsu stuff. Fujitsu sponsor quite a lot of the equipment at the college. And we'll get them come down and they'll do courses on all their AC and everything. And they explain, as we do, we go through like pumps and everything within all their normal training. But the guys from Fujitsu will explain why they're better off using them on their systems and everything. So dependent where that system's going to be positioned in a house, can it just be a gravity drain or has it got to be a pump? If it's in an office block, do you link all different pumps up? Whatever, they go through it a lot more with the guys on that side of thing, and I suppose that's the aesthetics of it and what needs to be where. And it's like they're looking at how it's all wired in. making sure that they're not just wiring that pump into the system. It should have its own supply and stuff like that if it goes wrong and everything. So and this is the sort of stuff, going back to what you was talking about earlier about other people coming into the industry who aren't qualified, who don't know what they're doing. That potentially, then you're looking at problems again, aren't you? Because where are they going to wire it? They're going to wire it to the easiest place possible. They may not be putting in the extra supplies and that for them. So.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I think maybe then there's some work to be done there in terms of actual education. I mean, with the sort of the rise of domestic AC, I mean, Daniel, what's sort of your view on this in terms of I don't want to use the word cowboys, but people coming in and doing things perhaps that could be damaging to the industry? Is there different things that we could do as an industry to support best practice? You know, for example, you know, the use of condensate pumps instead of pipe runs. Do you see that as being you know, something that would be a worthwhile thing to explore?
Well, yeah, I mean, one good way of doing it is obviously I'm with like a trade directory, so everything I do is reviewed by the customer. So you know, if you're constantly getting reviewed and you're doing a good job, then you know, you're top of the sort of search engine as such. And if you get a bad review, you might as well just give up with the actual directory, because you're just not going to get seen or anything. But I mean, it's difficult, because I do see a lot of, I think, builders and plumbers trying to install air conditioning, and it kind of all comes down to cost at the end of the day, you know. So I've had plenty of times where I put in prices for work and I've not won it, and I've gone back to the sites or driven past and I've seen what's been put in, and it's awful. But if it some of these clients, if it works, they're just happy to have it, even though you know. But it's just an awful installation, and it, you know, it might only last sort of 2 or 3 years, but by the time something goes wrong with it, the people who've done it are long gone, you know. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know how you'd police it, other than some sort of certification, you know, like they have gas safe, so you have to certificate something, maybe some sort of database somewhere that it all gets put onto, you know, with your sort of like a F-gas number, some sort of a register like that. But it's really difficult.
Okay.
This, I think,
sorry.
This, I think, is this like you just said about the ACS and everything. Now we have got F-gas. That is our license to practice, really, isn't it? However, anyone can go and do an F-gas course. You can go along, you can do an open book course, and anyone can be passed in a week. Literally, we've had guys here who were at the college. We do the City and Guilds one. That's an online test, closed book, and everything like that. So we've had guys who have come here to pass that, have failed it, have tried the test numerous times and failed it, and gone away and come back 2 weeks later with an F-gas Category 1 course where they've gone and sat at another centre that was open book. And
I mean, you can do it online now, can't you? So.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, oh yeah, I'm qualified, and that's what a lot of employers look at. They just say, have you got your F-gas? It's not, have you got a qualification? If you want to get your ACS gas certificate, you have to do plumbing qualifications to actually be able to get it. You have to prove that you are in the industry and that you are working on that equipment for a long time. We get guys in here who come to do our F-gas short courses, and you go, day one, right, anyone who has not been in the industry for 2 years minimum, you might as well get up and walk away, because this isn't a teaching course. We don't teach them the F-gas. We give them the information that's within the F-gas regulations and everything. Then we show them what the practical assessment's going to be. and then we expect them to be able to do it. Now, if they're not in industry and they haven't done the practical side of it, they're going to fail. So we tell them that right at day one. If you haven't done this and you're not going to be able to do it, get up and leave now. Go back and get your money back before we start the course, because you won't pass it. But we have got places where where people can just go away and get them within 4 or 5 days. And I think that's what needs policing.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
our industry needs that.
I think as well, you know, you've talked about some sort of leave behind. Obviously, you know, when you're doing a PPM, you can leave a certificate behind, sort of saying what products you've used and what work's been carried out. So I suppose essentially, if we're sort of talking about best practice and obviously having the relevant qualifications, that kind of thing, I mean, you almost want that on an installation level as well, don't you, where you actually do have a leave behind, a certificate saying the work that's been carried out, the products that you've used, you know, F-gas number, all of those things. So there's actually a record of that that stays with you and stays with the customer as well. And it's almost, you know, we talk to FMs at Aspen, and it's quite interesting. You know, I think sometimes the customers don't perhaps understand the intricacies of the air conditioning, so they perhaps don't know what to look for or what to ask for, which is perhaps why when they do get a substandard installation, they perhaps don't realise. So I think there's work to be done there as well in terms of educating the customer. And perhaps that can be done by quite a simple, you know, a simple checklist certificate, which is generated when you do that installation. And perhaps again that would potentially avoid some of the other people sort of coming in and giving it a go if there was certain things that had to be checked. I mean, maybe that could work. Maybe that's something that we could investigate, you know, as an industry.
I think that's what you need. You need the industry. This is the thing. It's the industry's got to get together, and I think a lot of our industry is very segmented, and certain people won't talk to certain people because they work for a different company and this, that, and the other. People really do have to get together and decide as an industry how we want to push all this. It's like with all the new R32 stuff coming through. All right, it's mildly flammable, so we've got an F-gas course there. Should we make a flammables course mandatory? We're going to be working with a lot more flammable refrigerants within the future. So do we push that more? Do we push as an industry and say we need to make this a mandatory thing going forward? Because when people start using R290, R600 all the time on different bits and pieces, it won't be long until someone does get hurt. And then it'll be, why isn't this mandatory?
Yeah.
And then we go from there.
Yeah, it goes back to that best practice again, doesn't it? And actually looking at what the industry needs as a whole, and then basically disseminating that down through every single layer of it. So, you know, from manufacturers right down to, you know, your engineers, your suppliers, your customers, everybody. So everybody's on the same page and understands, you know, sort of what's needed. I do have another sort of question as well that I'd like to ask, just moving back towards the domestic sort of AC. At what stage in the aircon specification, it's actually one of the questions I sort of sent out, is considered for the optimum siting of a condensate pump and therefore choosing the best pump for the application? So I put my teeth back in. I think that's probably one for you, Daniel. You know, when do you make that decision? Is that something that a customer makes in terms of when you're specifying a unit, having a look at the room, having a look at the size of the room, etc., etc.? When's that decision made for a condensate pump?
So that would basically be when I do a site visit and we discuss where a unit's going to be positioned, and if it's realistically, I only really use probably 2 different types of condensate pumps in a domestic situation. I try my best to go with mini aquas, because one, they will fit behind a unit if you need them to. Secondly, if you've got to have the trunking going up, if it's on a first floor and you can and you're taking pipework up into a loft, I'll put the pump up in the loft space and then just a float sensor below, and it keeps everything absolutely silent. But basically, yeah, it comes down to, on the site visit, the client never asks, you know, what type of pump you're using or whatever. I will try my best to make sure there's no trunking involved. I will try my best. If I can, I'll put a unit on an external wall, to be honest, and then it's a gravity drain to outside, because obviously a pump is eventually something that can go wrong. It's something that needs to be, you know, then they don't last forever. It's another costing for them in the future. It's another costing for them as part of the install cost. So, you know, it's just a discussion with the client, deciding where they want units, and then sort of working out from there how we're going to get rid of the condensate.
Yeah. And I mean, how does it work? I have to excuse my ignorance on this, but if you have, for example, a block of flats and you have aircon, and if it's, you know, a beautiful glass structure like we're seeing so often now in London and things like that, how do you factor in the removal of the condensate in buildings like that? Because obviously you can't gravity drain it out the side of the building there. So how would that work?
So if I do the jobs I do in London, they're normally, I mean, you're normally looking at like a strip out and then a rebuild. So for me, I'll run either a pump and then a drain, and then it go into like a non-return valve, and then the plumbers will plumb it into a bathroom that they're doing. So I'll take it to a certain point, and then they're finish the job off, because obviously it's you've got to tie in with other sort of companies, other trades. So I get my bit done, I'll leave it to a point, and then they finish it off as they do their bathrooms or toilets and things. So that tends to be how we do it there. So if it's like a glass structure or something like that, you've got to look at something internal. There's always drains somewhere. So whether it means you know, cutting out a wall or taking out a partition wall or something to get it done, then you have to do that.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. I have just sort of one more sort of question on this. In terms of training requirements for the industry, obviously we focus on the practicalities and about how to actually do the installations and everything else. What advice would you give to an apprentice just coming into the industry about best practice and making sure that they do a good job? What would your advice be to someone brand new?
Who's that to?
Anybody.
Make sure you've got someone good that you're working with. I mean, I was lucky enough to have someone who you know was very experienced and sort of really worked to a very good standard. So I was able to just sort of like emulate what they did, and they were, you know, happy to teach me. And so it's really, yeah, I'd say just it's the people you're working with, isn't it? You've got to make sure you're working with people who are sort of good at their job, and you know, want to do a good job and want to help you.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I say, or one of the things I say to them, and the other guys say to them at the college, is like when they're bending all their pipework up and putting their pipework in, we're doing pipework exercises and that with them. You turn around to them and go, would you want that inside your house? Would you put that? Would you say that's mine? And a load of them go, no. Well, go and do it again then. And that's it. But they will. They'll look at it, and they'll get better and better at it. And that's the thing. It's getting them to take responsibility for what they're doing. You see some of them, and some of them really just don't care. They're like, oh yeah, whatever. So like, no, I'm still going to get paid for it. And you go, yeah, but when they're doing their assessments, and it's a big pipework assessment that they've got to do within the qualification that takes 2 days, you're like, yeah, what's that then? They go, oh yeah, but it'll do. No, it won't. It's supposed to be 150 mil centres. That's not 150 mil. Do it again. Oh, it's not fair. Yeah, but it is. It says that's the specification. Do it to the spec, and that's it. They have to start taking responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. I mean, what do you think as a manufacturer? You know, obviously we do pumps, we do rooftop supports, we do all kinds of things for the industry. And as a manufacturer, is there anything that you would like to see more of from us in terms of support for apprentices, support for people coming into the industry?
Maybe like take your pumps, take the Aspen pumps and everything. Now, maybe you could do something where you went round to like colleges or whatever and did like a couple of days seeing the students within the college and go over your pumps, show them, because when they get it, it's all nice in a box and they just stick it in a bit of trunking somewhere and wire that end in and run that bit of hose, and they don't know what's all inside the pump, how the pump's actually built, what it does inside it. We can go over the basic pump stuff like we do with them, but maybe you as a supplier could come in and go, right, this is how that pump is built, and split the pumps up, even like, I don't know, show and tell boards or something that you could put into the colleges with bits of the pump stripped apart so they can see how they go together and what they actually do. And maybe like a board where you could have a few on there and you just put some power to it and it pumps stuff around. Just something like that, just something so it's visual that they can actually see it, as well as the theory side behind it. They get to see something.
Yeah, practicalities of it. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much, guys. That's been a really, really useful chat. Stu, Chris, Lauren, is there anything else that you'd like to ask guys while we're here? Or Daniel and Shaun, is there anything you'd like to ask us?
I've got a quick query, really for you, Daniel, I think. Would you say that the domestic market is more price sensitive than the commercial market, in that your customer base are, I guess, really spending their own money instead of their company's money? Does that make a difference? And if they are that price sensitive, are there elements of a job that you would be prepared to compromise on, and are there others that you wouldn't because of the quality of the job?
So I would say yes, it is definitely price sensitive. I've lost plenty of jobs that I've quoted. I'm losing more and more all the time. So I might maybe win 50% of the jobs I'm quoting. And I struggle to do it cheaper. I'm looking at my prices and thinking I can't drop my price anymore. That's when you sit there and wonder about these cowboys out there and what's going in and how they're doing it. But no, I won't compromise. So that is my price, and I will literally just use the best materials. I use units that I'm happy with. So normally I go down the route of Fujitsu because I've used them for years and years, and I never have any issues with them. So I'll go with systems and obviously pumps and things that I know are good, and I don't compromise on my price. So that is it. And then, you know, it's just a case of seeing whether you win it or not.
Understood. I guess it's that old adage that you get what you pay for. If you want a quality job, this is the price. End of story.
Yeah, the last thing I need to do is to be coming back to jobs because things are going wrong, or you know. So for me, I don't want to have to go back because I've done something wrong, or I've took a shortcut, or I've used sort of like inferior materials, or a unit that's not very good. I just want to do it properly in the first place, and then you know, leave the client happy.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Daniel, what would you say your split is on domestic between bedroom installations and living environment installations?
I would say probably about 70% bedrooms.
Right.
Yeah, at the minute, yeah. But then it tends to be the bedrooms that people want doing, and then once you've done that, you tend to get a lot of return customers who say, "Oh, it's brilliant. You know, could you come and do the living room?" So you tend to get that a lot as well.
This is generally high walls. You don't get asked to use ducted in the loft space and grills or.
So all my high end stuff is ducted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're in a situation where it's you're fighting against an architect or a designer because you're trying to explain to them how you need airflow on a ducted unit, and they're telling you you've got this tiny little space to fit it in, and they don't want too many grills on show. Yeah. So high end, it tends to be ducted, and it's always a fight to be able to do it properly, because design outweighs practicality in these sort of builds. But normally it will be a wall mount system, unless it's something like a loft conversion, and then you might be looking at a floor standing, because you might have the sloped sides of a roof.
Excellent.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody? No? I'd like to thank you all very much for taking time out of your days to do this. It's been really, really useful. So I really appreciate that. We have a new Knowledge Hub area on our website. I invite you to go and have a look at it. Over the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks, this will go up on there as well. We're doing a whole sort of discussion around the rise of domestic AC and mini pumps in the UK. So you will be famous. So thank you very much again for taking the time to speak with us today.